that soon. And then we just sent out a email about an event featuring the Royal Dutch Shell CFO, who turns out is a Berkeley grad, a connection we fairly recently made. She's going to be speaking virtually from The Hague, and that's on, I think it's October 6th. That's in the morning since she is in Europe. So we're taking advantage of being able to bring someone in from afar.
Great. Thank you, Andy.
Yep.
Who else? Just raise your hand or speak up. Okay, Tim. Tim, you're on mute if you're talking.
Oh, sorry, guys. I would grab the screen, but forgot to hit unmute. So Tim Lippman here. So yeah, there's a whole lot going on with our projects, but we'll probably save more of that for another day, especially when we get some results on this carbon neutrality study that we're doing for CLEE PA, which we're midstream on. So more on that later this fall. Somebody sent me this, and I just thought I'd announce it. So this is a fundraiser next Wednesday at 5 o'clock with Fran Pavley, who many of you know, landmark legislator for a lot of our important legislation, David Sandalow, former undersecretary, and then Ed Begley Jr., who I heard speak about electric cars, must have been like 1995 at UC Davis, and I was hanging out with him. So he's been doing this a long time, and the guy who did the Hookah electric car. So I'll forward this to the group after the call in case anyone wants to join. It's a $50 buy-in minimum.
Thanks, Tim.
Certainly.
Other updates? Hi, Gail. We introduced ourselves, so why don't you add yours in?
Okay, I'm Gail Brager, and I'm with the Center for the Built Environment and Center for Environmental Design Research.
Great. Anyone else with a quick update for us? Okay, let me go one more thing then before we get to the main event. Let's go back to this and here. So on Cool Climate News for September, and I'll put these in the chat and I'll also send them out in an email, the links. I thought, gee, what a concept. Let's focus on fire this time. So if you're not sick of it all, here were, I thought, 4 interesting things. First on insurance and fires, New York Times from about a week ago. You may have seen that one. Second one on housing and land use, which is such a big issue that we probably don't talk about enough in terms of California wildfires. We certainly will be talking about it. And this is a point of view from a blog in LA that is working on infill housing and affordable housing. And so you can see their bias there. And then a NASA kind of backgrounder on the Western US and fires, 6 things to know about wildfires. And finally, one that just came out today in the Atlantic called The West Has Never Felt So Small. So those are all on fire, and we will put them in the chat function, and you can use them at your leisure. Great nighttime reading. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and bring in Jordan. Jordan, the floor is for you and your team. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Bruce. Appreciate it. I will go ahead and try and share my screen. I'm 50-50 with Zoom today, so we'll see if this works. Okay, do you actually see a PowerPoint slide? Fantastic. There's all of 4 PowerPoint slides, so it was really critical that we made that work. So we will go through, as we said, so we just wanted to give a little overview of what CLEE is, what we're all about, what we're doing right now. I am Executive Director of CLEE. I've been here for about 5 years, but CLEE itself has been here around for about 15 in various incarnations. So it started out actually we're based within the law school, and back in around 2004, 2005, Chris Edley, when he was the dean of the law school, decided that law really needed to be doing more on the research side. So how could we kind of fulfill our public service mission more? So faculty were doing their individual research, but how could we kind of support that and make that more robust? And this is the insider Berkeley version of what CLEE is in terms of understanding what our structure is and how we fit into the university. Chris seeded a bunch of different centers within the law school, and he basically gave us free run to develop however we would like, with the idea that we're focused in these different areas and let's see what fit. CLEE has taken a little bit of a different direction than some of the other centers within the law school, and we really have gone deep on the research side. So we are really focused on how do we kind of act as a conduit or a vector between the university and decision makers. So how are we pulling kind of the creativity, the intellectual kind of horsepower from campus? How do we make sure that that's infusing kind of decisions that are being made today? We have, okay, I pulled up a title slide and I can't move forward. Yes, there we can. We have all of these are kind of the statements that we put in all of our annual reports and kind of brochures and things like that. But the core kernel really is this idea of focusing on policy and how do we become a vehicle for deploying the solutions to climate, kind of water scarcity, and various kind of environmental and energy issues. How do we propose kind of innovative and pragmatic policy solutions? So the vast majority of what we do, although we're based in the law school, it's not litigation. I myself have never litigated ever in my life. Wouldn't know the first thing about it. There are people on the team with deep expertise in it, but I myself don't know the first thing about it. We're very focused on the policy side of it, and thus, kind of inherently the interdisciplinary approach. So we have worked with a lot of you on the line and a lot of external partners. I would say it is more common than not. I would almost say we almost always work with other partners. Very rarely is it just us digging in for kind of siloed legal or policy research without working with either external partners who are kind of involved in the issue or other experts from different disciplines. But so that's a little bit about who we are. As I said, from a technical perspective, we are housed within the law school, so we're not an ORU. We just exist in kind of a gray space within the law school. Who we are, this is, well, it's apparently a slightly blurry picture of our team. There are 3 people on here who have actually moved on since this was compiled, but then we have a few people that are starting next month. So this is the core of our team. We have, as you see, there are a few faculty members that are sprinkled in, but the vast majority of our team are kind of full-time. Most of us are in academic positions, but non-faculty academic research positions. This covers all of our program areas. So in research, our focus areas are climate and renewable energy, water, and that is largely focused on California water, and then oceans, and that is actually both California domestic and then including international work on healthy oceans and reducing pollution offshore. I put up here just as a side note, because we do work with faculty and students on, kind of very kind of core education, either class or kind of student support activities. But I'd say, that's roughly kind of 20% of what we do. And then the rest of our time is really focused on the full-time research. With that, how are we? Okay, terrific. Yeah, 5 minutes in. Terrific. Right on time. So with that, I would actually love to, obviously, for purposes of today's conversation, we wanted to focus on our climate and energy work. Our climate program has been kind of transformed in the last couple of years with a couple of really exciting additions. But rather than hear from me about them, I'm going to turn it over to the team to discuss them. But the core of our climate work has long been how do you tackle as quickly as possible? How do you reduce emissions? How do you increase deployment of renewable energy? And how do you facilitate kind of meaningful adaptation? So we have, I'd say at this point, it's about half of CLEE focuses full-time and exclusively on climate, but all of our programs certainly have a climate, and most of them have a renewable energy component as well. So with that, I want to turn over to Ken, if you're ready to take over the reins. We were incredibly excited when Ken joined CLEE about a year ago. I don't think anyone on here, I can stop sharing my screen. Yeah. I don't think anyone on here actually needs an introduction to Ken, but if he doesn't kill me for it, I'm gonna do one anyway. For anyone who has not met Ken in depth before, Ken's one of our leading environmental law and policy experts in the state of California, if not the nation. He's been a longtime personal kind of idol of mine, has won every award for environmental law and climate change work that you can win, and has obviously a long, illustrious 35-plus year career with the California Attorney General's Office as Senior Policy Advisor to Governor Jerry Brown, as the former Director of the Office of Planning and Research, former Chair of the Strategic Growth Council, and the list goes on. So for me, it is a genuine joy to get to log on every day and get to work with him. So Ken, over to you.
Jordan is my personal introduction. I take her everywhere. Thanks for that. I am very pleased to have been at CLEE for a year now. It's obviously bizarre circumstances, but the idea of what I'm doing is integrated nicely into CLEE, which is how do we move the most promising climate solutions more quickly to policy and scale? And I'm really focused on how we do the nuts and bolts of that, because I've spent, as Jordan said, 35 years in government. So I just want to quickly go through a few of our projects right now, just to give you a flavor of it. The most timely is that literally yesterday we launched Grizzly Corps officially, Berkeley's first AmeriCorps program. And it's particularly timely because it is focused on forest and fire resilience in part, and also on regenerative agriculture. So what we've done is we're sending 20 recent grads, and Jordan and I got to meet them yesterday virtually. Incredibly impressive group, probably more impressive than they would have been without COVID, because we were able to provide 20 recent grads with a job for 11 months. Each of them will be placed around the state of California, either in a forest-related site with a site partner, or farm-related. Many of them are resource conservation districts. Some of them are UC extension sites. All of them, both the site partners and the AmeriCorps members, the Grizzly Corps members, are really excited to get going. They're spending this week doing a bunch of training. So that's just started. We are, as I say, we have 20 of them. What we'd like to do over the next year is to expand that, but maybe just increase the size of the existing program with more partners. But we also are thinking of whether we can expand into food systems and integrate some of the farm, and then move it sort of more upstream towards the consumer with what we're doing, and we'll probably have a planning process to work that through. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. Let me quickly go through three others and then turn it over to Ethan and Ted. But the three others I want to mention, first, we are working on a methane protocol, and Ted and I are working together on this. we think that one of the places we can make the most progress most quickly is to reduce methane emissions in the oil and gas sector. And the state of California has done a fair amount of work on that. And there are efforts around the world, but they're sort of disparate. And so what Ted and I are doing are using as a base the California methane actions in that sector and developing a protocol. We've talked to Mary Nichols. She's going to help us roll it out at Climate Week in New York in a couple of weeks. And then we're trying to get the UN entity, the CCAC, which is the UN entity that has worldwide effort on this set of issues around short-lived climate pollutants, to adopt the protocol with the idea that every jurisdiction that has oil and gas sector would adopt it. The idea is to have them build an inventory of emissions, set a goal to reduce, and then identify the actions they're going to take to reduce those emissions. So we're hoping to roll that out, as I say, in the next few weeks, at least in concept. It may take a little longer to get the specific protocol, and we'll see how that goes. But you know, that conceivably could really leverage California's effort. The couple other things I want to mention. One of them is an effort to look closely at the Trump rollbacks, the environmental rollbacks over the last 4 years. There are a number of compilations of those already. And so what we're doing is to put together those compilations, make what we would hope to be a fairly definitive lists, and then to break them into easily rescinded and more difficult to rescind. For the easy ones, we think, should there be a new administration, that the new administration should very seriously consider doing anything in the easy category very quickly. And then for the more difficult ones, we are going to develop potential strategies for how they might be rescinded most effectively. And so that work is being done in partnership with a number of entities and groups, but CLEE is leading that effort. And then one last thing I want to mention, one of the most difficult sets of problems is how do you get landowners working in natural lands to actually enhance their land. We know from work by people like Wendy Silver here at UC Berkeley that soil can sequester a whole bunch of carbon. And that's soil in both the open space realm and in agriculture. But it's not so easy to get people to do the enhancements, sometimes called regenerative agriculture, that would really promote that set of sequestration. So we're working with the city of San Jose and some other partners on taking the sort of old legal idea of transfer development rights, where an entity would give up, where a landowner would give up the right to develop their property in exchange for a developer somewhere else to have additional development ability. I want to take that concept and change it a bit to create a credit program where an agricultural landowner would get credit for doing environmental enhancement like regenerative agriculture. And then an infill developer somewhere in the San Jose area would then buy that credit and then get a density bonus of some sort or development bonus of some sort. It's a complicated problem with a lot of legal and other issues, but we are making a fair amount of progress with that and hope to get it going shortly. So I'll stop there with that. There's a bunch more, but that's some of the highlights. So I don't know, is it going to Ethan next?
Yeah, I'm happy to go next. Thank you, Ken. And I know you've got an endless list of projects, so I imagine that was hard to narrow that down for this presentation, but they're all interesting and great. And that's why we're happy to have Ken on board, because he's many things, but an idea generator is definitely one of those. So it's always exciting to hear what he's up to. I will talk, my instructions from Jordan, Ted and I are only allowed to talk about 3 of our projects. So I'm going to take 2, and then I'll hand it off to Ted to take 1. But I want to just sneak in a kind of a bonus project. I think I mentioned it before to all of you, our Climate Break audio program, which also covers another one of Ken's ideas. I think we've mentioned this, but this is our effort to create 90-second clips designed to be run on radio stations that feature climate solutions and interviews with experts. And so we actually got a grant from campus to feature UC Berkeley researchers in particular. So if we haven't already knocked on your door, not literally, because we'd have to keep a distance with COVID and all that, in terms of email for an interview. We would love to hear about all the great work that you're up to. And then our goal is to pitch this then to radio stations to run. And we also have a website, climatebreak.org. So anyways, I just violated my limit to keep this to 2 projects, but I think I already talked about Climate Break. So that was more just refreshing what
This is perfectly representative of how well I do organizing CLEE.
and my ability to follow rules as well. So anyway, so that didn't count, but climatebreak.org, and that definitely helps, should help everyone here if you want to get the word out about your projects. All right, so now I'll launch into my official 2 projects. So the first is thanks to Bruce and hosting that really excellent meeting with Kate at OPR and New and Tara. We have actually 3 convenings, but all under one rubric. So this counts as just one project, carbon sequestration. So we have for 11 years now convened small expert groups on different climate mitigation topics. Usually it's renewable energy or zero emission vehicles, but a whole range of stuff. And of course now in the COVID days, we can't do that in person, but we've been holding a number of Zoom meetings, kind of like what you're all looking at here with, like 12 or 15 people on a screen. And actually they've gone in some ways a little better than the in-person meetings in terms of efficiency and participation. And I really like some of the Zoom tools. I mean, we hope to get back into a room at Berkeley at some point and bring everyone together, but in the meantime, Zoom's been pretty good. So when Bruce organized the OPR briefing, we kind of seized on a bunch of the topics they mentioned because we are always looking for content, and we're really like to work with state agency folks on different topics. We'd actually worked with Ken when he was with Jerry Brown, and so it's great to be able to transition the project to work with the Newsom administration. So under the carbon sequestration heading, we're doing a convening. It looks like we're doing a convening. We're still scoping this out with them. This is very early stages, but the first would be on carbon sequestration using nature-based solutions on natural and working lands in California. So this is sort of a broad brush approach to get some expert input on what the state can do to improve nature-based carbon sequestration solutions. That would be one discussion, and we're still kind of fleshing out the details on that, working with folks at Natural Resources Agency and some of the other agencies that are involved. And of course, there's been a lot ongoing at the state with this discussion, so we want to try to, slot in nicely with the existing discussions. Secondly, looking specifically at forests and looking at biomass and forest products that could come out of the forest as a way to obviously reduce wildfire risks, but also help sequester that wood, not up in the sky or raining down on my house, which it currently is doing. And then the third piece of that would be looking at mechanical means of carbon sequestration, working potentially with CalGEM to help them think through what is the regulatory environment in California for these direct air capture project proposals that they're getting. And this is so new to the state that it's not even clear who the lead agency for CEQA purposes would be to do the environmental review. So that's kind of the level of where the state is at right now on mechanical air capture. There's, like I said, a number of proposals. Could potentially, if the economics worked out, could be a nice transition for the fossil fuel sector to get to, keep some of those workers employed doing something other than burning carbon. So that would be nice. Anyway, so that's just under one giant rubric of carbon sequestration, working with the state on that. We don't quite know which direction they want to go, but if any of you have an interest in this, let us know. And you know, to the extent that your expertise kind of fits with what the state needs to hear from at this point, it would be great to get you in the Zoom room, so to speak.
Just
Right.
real quick, Ethan, are you working with the lab on that carbon sequestration? Because they have a lot of experts.
I think we will. It's just, you know, we're still at the very beginning of just scoping out, you know, what are the issues we want to cover, and at a broad brush, who makes sense that to be in the room in terms of worth the input. But they've already mentioned, you know, some of their lab resources, so I think we will. Which I would love to.
Does the government relations know about this?
I'm sorry, Michelle, you just cut off.
No, I was just going to say I'll mention it to Jim Hawley, who does state government relations for the lab, to let him know what you're doing. So if, you know, just so if he wants to share it with some of his folks. Oh, and Bill's on too.
And
Michelle and Ethan, if I could just interject briefly, if I may, is that okay, Bruce?
yeah, absolutely.
So there is, yeah, to Michelle's point, Ethan, I think there is a lot of interest. I have just inventoried the expertise of the lab. So we're sort of gearing up on this, and this has attracted the interest both of our Deputy Director of Science, Horst Simon, as well as the Director, Mike Witherall. So there's intense interest at the lab in this, and we are, and I had broached the idea to both Randy Katz and to David Ackerley to brief campus leaders on what the lab could bring to the mix once we have a better sense of that. But we'd be happy to tell you, show you what we have, or, maybe offline outside the confines of this meeting, so you can sort of see what we've got going at any time that would be useful to you.
That would be great, Bill. I'm so glad to hear you've already done that work. That could really make it easy for us to kind of identify, who's doing what. So yeah, let's follow up on that.
And Susan Hubbard was in our first meeting that
Right.
we had with Kate Gordon and the others.
Uh-huh.
And so Ethan, I sent you a link with Susan today if you didn't get the email already. So,
Yeah, I think I saw that.
and she spoke up very nicely in that meeting for a number of things that the lab is working on this issue.
Yeah, we should probably talk Bill at some more length, because sequestration is, in many iterations, is high in our list of policy matters to pursue and promote.
Well, I think it's, I used to laugh at how much emphasis the integrated assessment models put on it, because it's been hard to figure out technically how to get to that point. But the, not to get all doom and gloom on people, but if you look at the special report on 1.5 degrees that came out from the IPCC 2 years ago, they are essentially saying that we have to take the fossil fuel industry and flip the sign on it, SIGN, like go from plus 40 gigatons a year now to minus 20 gigatons by the year 2100. And that is a phenomenal lift, but it's probably something we have to do. So now, no time like the present.
Yeah.
Well, nothing we can't handle in a 3-hour Zoom meeting. So appreciate that, Bill. Looking forward to catching up with you offline for those resources. All right, so that was my giant #1 project. The #2 project, which I'll mention, is maybe not so much in the professional wheelhouse of any of you, but potentially in the personal wheelhouse, which is looking at major transit projects in California, and why or on time. We've all just become kind of numb to how long these projects take, but we got a grant through the Berkeley Institute of Transportation Studies to do 5 case studies on California transit projects and why they've gone so poorly. I don't think it'll be, sadly, hard to find projects that have gone poorly, because pretty much they all do. And we're just kind of numb to this, but it's kind of amazing. It's not just California. The US as a whole is, among advanced economies, is just terrible at building transit. And then we all know from a climate quality of life perspective what that means, not to mention from a sort of public sector budget perspective. So we're just getting launched on that. If any of you are interested, we're happy to keep you posted, but just wanted to let you know. And with that, I will throw the proverbial Zoom ball over to Ted Lamb.
Hi, everyone. Just one other project to update you on. And as Jordan mentioned, in the last couple of years, with the addition of Ken in particular, we've expanded our sort of the scope of our climate program. Of course, what she meant by that was that I came here 3 years ago, and that was the beginning of everything. But no, not able to join us here today is Dave Jones, who is the former state insurance commissioner for 8 years, overlapping with Governor Brown's term. And prior to that was a state legislator for, I think, his full term out, I think for 6 years. And he has been running part-time a new climate risk initiative here at CLEE focused on risks to financial markets and insurance markets of climate change and potential solutions to help mitigate climate change and to start adaptation efforts using financial markets and using insurance instruments. Through that initiative and with Dave, we have been, Ethan and I have been working on a project that is just about to come to completion, looking at the potential to use California's regulatory authority and financial weight as a state to increase the integration of ESG issues, which most of you I'm sure know, environmental, social, and governance issues in investment decision-making throughout the state. And so we've done a fairly comprehensive look at just what are the existing elements of state law authority in financial markets and what levers the state has as a direct player in financial markets and as an investor to then develop a set of recommendations to increase the extent to which investors in the state and around the world are taking account of ESG issues, and in particular, of course, for us, of climate risk. And this is fundamentally different from impact investing. This is really looking at risk management and investment opportunities that happen to overlap with environmental and social goals. It is often ends up having the same effect as impact investing, but the goal is not specifically to push any particular substantive agenda item in the real economy, but rather to mitigate risk to investments, and in particular to state investments and state public pension funds that hold a lot of money for residents and state employees throughout the state. And we've developed a set of recommendations that include ideas for new legislation, for example, directing climate risk disclosure by corporations, and new ways that the public pension funds, CalPERS, CalSTRS, and others can increase their use of investment managers who look specifically at these issues, who look at environmental issues in particular. Ways that the state as a direct investor and a provider of public financing can increase the disclosure of how the impacts that projects might have, and use that as a lens to select projects at the state level that are better performing in environmental performance and other issues, and ways for insurers to make sure that their operations and the insurance that they provide adequately reflects climate risk, in particular, recognizing, including Bruce, what you said earlier, the fact that the home insurance market and the property insurance market are being drastically reshaped every year by wildfire risk. This is a document that's coming out, I think, by the end of this month, and is really for us a first step, we hope, in a broader scheme of looking at financial risk as relates to climate change, and the ways that California, as the 5th largest economy, an investor, a direct investor of hundreds of billions of dollars every year in pension funds and in infrastructure, and as the home to major industries that can really push a lot of global market change, can lead in this sort of emerging area of climate policy, as it has in other areas of climate policy to date. So that's just another way that our climate program is growing, and one that we hope to continue to grow. And with that, I will pass it back to Jordan.
Thanks, Ted. Appreciate it. And thank you, Ethan, for violating every guideline that I gave you. So I will turn, unfortunately, Fan couldn't be here today. She had a conflict, she couldn't move. But so I will dive a little bit next into the California-China Climate Institute, which is another arm of our climate program. So the California-China Climate Institute, or CCCI, and I know at least Bill on the line, he's on our advisory committee, We launched this, well, we officially launched this at Climate Week last year. I was in the hospital giving birth to my child, so I wasn't launching anything to do with it, but the rest of the team launched it. The China Institute is chaired by Governor Jerry Brown on our side, and it's a partnership between the UCs. So although it's housed here at Berkeley, it's a partnership between the UCs more broadly and Tsinghua University in China. And the idea is, how can we facilitate kind of collective action on climate? There are three main pillars of the Institute. One is research, one is dialogue, and the third is training. So on the research side, we have, as of right now, kind of our identified research priorities for these first couple of years are low carbon transportation and zero emission vehicles, carbon pricing, climate adaptation and resilience, sustainable land use and climate smart ag, carbon capture and storage, and long-term climate goal setting and policy enforcement. In some ways, it's a little bit of, kind of what doesn't fit under one of those umbrellas. But on the other hand, those are kind of our focus areas. The idea is for us to undertake research, for Tsinghua to undertake research, and then for us to look for, are there areas where joint research is beneficial. The dialogue arm is really focused on how do you facilitate high-level dialogue between decision makers in the two jurisdictions. And that has been taking place. Obviously, it was meant to be in person, and with a series of kind of visits back and forth. Along came COVID, and now it is about facilitating high-level dialogues via Zoom or phone. So those have tended to be much smaller sessions, but we are pleased with kind of the high-level participation we've gotten. Although our last one was interesting for kind of one of the first times. We had some backing out from some of the Chinese members. And in general, that has been going well. On the third, the training arm has been difficult to launch because that was supposed to be in-depth kind of study sessions of researchers coming. Primarily, the first few were supposed to be study tours related to air quality, folks coming from China over here. And so obviously we've had to put those on hold and kind of rethink how those can be configured. But those are the three pillars. This is meant to be a long-term initiative. Having Governor Brown, former Governor Brown at the helm, obviously is one of the pivotal pieces of this in terms of both getting access to the decision-making folks basically in China, so having kind of access at a higher level, as well as being able to kind of give it a very action-oriented focus. So it's very much about what can we actually achieve on the ground. So what research can we do that will lead directly to either pilot projects or on-the-ground initiatives in the near term. Unlike others of us on the call, this is my first time actually working with Governor Brown, and that pressure to let's see what the impact is very real, and in this case, very welcome. So that's the China Institute. Ken, I don't know, please feel free to jump in if there's anything that you want to add. Structurally within Berkeley, we have an academic advisory committee. There's about a dozen folks on faculty on campus who kind of have active China research, relevant research portfolios. And so they form an academic advisory committee. If you ever have questions or anything, feel free to reach out to me, Ken, Fan, or anyone. We have the website is ccci.berkeley.edu, and it has kind of the broad overview about the Institute. The one other thing I will say is that it is co-hosted by CLEE as well as by CNR. And even though he's not here, just a huge hooray for David and how collaborative he's been getting that Institute launched. For everyone who's familiar with how fun it is to launch things at Berkeley, and he's helped with a lot of the red tape. So that's CCCI. Ted mentioned Dave Jones, and so I will just highlight really quickly. So even though Dave is only working with us part-time, Dave has launched basically the Climate Risk Initiative. So working really on these questions of the intersection of climate action and the financial sector. And so in addition to the PRI funded project that, or the ESG focused project that Ted just mentioned, I'll just flag that Dave was also part of the CFTC report on basically the managing risk and the risks of climate on the, our financial sector that came out yesterday. So he's part of that subcommittee. So it's been great having him as a resource. This is what he lives and breathes kind of 24/7 is how do you mobilize climate action in the financial sector and where are those levers. Obviously he has great expertise in the insurance sector, but he's very interested in the financial sector more broadly. The last piece I will mention, save this for last because it's a little bit of an offshoot, but just on the renewable energy front, so I head up our oceans work, and one of our focus areas right now is on offshore wind. So over the past year plus, we've been working with the major offshore wind developers that are interested in floating wind on the West Coast, as well as kind of the major ENGOs that are interested kind of in these issues. Working on a series of different initiatives right now, facilitating a working group that is between industry and ENGOs, fleshing out the priority research questions related to offshore wind and environmental impacts. And then invited, so we're ramping up, again, a group looking at questions specifically about entanglements and whether there's an MOU or some other sort of vehicle that can be signed ahead of time. And this would be kind of, again, a little bit of kind of gold standard setting for what you want to see for processes and agreements ahead of time in a nascent industry. So looking at measures that can be put in place ahead of time. So it's a pretty fun area to be working in since the industry is very interested in making this as kind of sustainable as possible. They obviously see offshore wind as renewable energy. That's why they're interested in it, is because of its sustainability, or at least the folks we're working with. And so it's pretty fun to be pulling together folks to be thinking about not just how do we kind of check the boxes, but if you're doing this offshore California, how do you really make this kind of a model? So a lot of fun stuff there, but if there are other folks on campus that are working on offshore wind, definitely would love to connect on that front. Oh, and then the third piece of that is we work with a lot of the decision makers, et cetera. So keeping in touch with them and facilitating a discussion about what our goals for the industry are. So where do we see offshore wind fitting into both California's kind of renewable energy mix, as well as with its other goals in terms of facilitating just transitions, in terms of supporting kind of economic development in key areas, et cetera. That's offshore wind. Those were all the projects that we had slated to highlight. The one thing that I will just kind of wrap up with before Bruce gongs me off the stage is just a kind of, as I said at the beginning, we always work with someone else. Oftentimes we work with a lot of kind of decision makers and regulators and agencies. A fair chunk of our funding actually ends up coming from the state, from various agencies that bring us in as in almost a kind of a consulting role. But to the extent that we can ever be helpful around campus with kind of our law and policy bend, obviously David Woolley is on the line and offers some similar expertise. But to the extent that we can ever be helpful, that's really what we would like to do. When I joined 5 years ago, when I started meeting people across campus, I can't tell you how many people said, wow, you're the first person from the law school I've met. And that's kind of the opposite of the approach that we want to have. So to the extent that we can be, kind of an open door at the law school and kind of for the perspective that we do bring, we'd like to contribute as much as we can.
Great. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, team. We have about 4 minutes left. We can do some quick questions. I have one just about process. How do you decide on your topics? I mean, you have funders, you have decision makers you're working with, and you have researchers and your own interests. Is it a real mix, or is it one or the other mostly?
Well, I'll start because I'm unmuted, but feel free to jump in. It's a mix. So we are all soft money. So we don't actually receive any money from the university. So we obviously have to kind of follow the grants and contracts and follow the crumbs. But we also, I'd say it's a mix of what we see kind of being solicited, and then what we come up with, and then we try to generate the interest in. So I think, like most of us, probably it's a split.
Okay. Questions for the team here?
I had a quick one for Ken. This is Tim. Ken, on the one, I was really interested in that idea on the development bonuses, the infill development idea. Something we're trying to wrap our heads around for this carbon neutrality study is that sort of land use, jobs, housing balance piece. How does it, possibly help constrain VMT over time? Do you guys have anything written up on that yet, or is it still just kind of early stage?
It's in fairly early stages, but VMT is definitely one of the benefits that we think can be monetized in this approach. I should be able. Let me see if the VMT piece is in any position to share, but it will be reasonably soon, I hope.
Okay, cool. I'll ping you on that. Maybe compare a few notes. I'll shoot you an email.
That would be great.
That sounded really interesting.
Tim,
and also, Ethan's transit idea I'm really interested in too, and I might have a few ideas for you, Ethan.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and I was going to say, actually, Tim, that we've done some work on SB 743, the VMT, with the potential for mitigation banks, which would also provide a revenue stream for VMT mitigation, reducing projects. We may do some work with the state next year, thinking through how to set up a sort of state-level mitigation bank for VMT, if that's available.
That sounds really cool. So I'm going to shoot you guys an email, and just if there's anything that we might be able to include in this report, I'd be very interested. For those who don't know, SB 743 essentially changed the way that projects are evaluated from a level of service, which is like how fast is the traffic flowing, to VMT impacts. So it really puts the metric where it should be, which is something the state can then learn a lot more from. Because if you're just talking about level of service, you don't really know what the VMT is, you don't know what the emissions are. But if you're focusing on VMT, that's so much more closely tied to emissions. So pretty important piece of legislation for all this. So thanks, Ethan.
Yeah, and thanks to Ken for helping to get the legislation done.
Yeah. Hey, good.
We have time for one more question for today.
Oops. Yeah, I did that legislation. That was brutal.
Wow.
It took years.
That seems like it'd be a really tough one with all the ossified transportation planners out there.
Any other questions for Jordan and Ethan and Ted and Ken right now?
Ken, compare how hard it was to get some 43 passed versus AmeriCorps set up on Berkeley.
743 took from the legislation to the regulation took me 5 years. So AmeriCorps Berkeley, which was hell for a year, it actually was easier.
There you go.
Frightening.
We have, just to finish up, we have Strategic Growth Council has sent to us a request for a grad student for 6 to 9 months. It's the smoke levels. They're very high today. I've got my inhaler and maybe I'm getting high from it. 6 to 9 months. I'll send this out in the email, but they're looking for a smart grad student to help them with their team working on a guidance for state agencies around embedding climate and climate risk into state assets. So it'd be a really interesting project. I'm going to talk to Bhavisha, who had to leave the call here early because she's got her whole network going of grad students. But I will send it to you all, and if you've got bright people, please, you'll see where to send the interest email. Jordan?
Sorry, just on the Strategic Growth Council front, just a note that Louise Bedsworth, the director, will be talking, we'll be doing a conversation with her next Tuesday if anyone wants to chime in.
Great.
So I can send you that too.
Thank you.
Are you, real fast, Ken, are you promoting the Grizzly Corps on our news center and with our media folks?
Yes, indeed. And the Chancellor's office has been really supportive.
Great.
So we're on it.
Excellent. Is there a website yet or not yet?
Yes, grizzly.berkeley.edu.
No, it's
Awesome.
Bearcore, isn't it?
No.
We'll
you
put
can go
it
to
in the notes.
you can go to either at this point because I have a forward, but it's grizzly.berkeley.edu.
Okay.
Terrific.
Thank you all. We're at time. Next month, it'll be Thursday, October 8th will be our next spotlight, to be determined. And thank you for giving us your time today. Stay safe. You know, I know the readings at our house were the highest they've been on, the worst they've been on air quality today here in Berkeley. But wherever you are, be safe and take action. And we will see you all over the next month.
Thank you, Bruce.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Bruce.